I'm Emma, 21 female. I live in a small apartment near my university, buried under blueprints and textbooks most days. For the last 3 years, my life has been a carefully constructed tower of late-night study sessions, part-time jobs, and the single-minded pursuit of becoming an architect. This entire future was built on the foundation of a prestigious scholarship, one that I thought was a point of pride for my entire family, especially my dad. I never imagined the man who taught me how to draw a straight line would be the one to shatter that foundation into a million pieces. This is the story of how I discovered my own father had stolen my future from me, and how I systematically took it all back. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My entire world, for as long as I can remember, has been about lines, angles, and structures. As a kid, while other girls were playing with dolls, I was building elaborate Lego cities that took over the entire living room floor. My dad, Mark, was my biggest cheerleader back then. He worked as a sales manager for a mid-size tech company, a job that involved a lot of travel and schmoozing, but he always found time for me. He'd sit on the floor, handing me the exact piece I needed, marveling at my creations. "You've got the eye, Emma," he'd say, ruffling my hair. "You're going to build skyscrapers one day." That praise was the bedrock of my confidence. It was his voice in my head that pushed me to apply for the architecture program at one of the top universities in the country. Getting in was one thing, paying for it was another. My dad and my stepmom, Susan, were comfortable, but not pay for a $60,000 a year tuition comfortable. Susan was a real estate agent who did well when the market was hot and stressed when it was not. Their finances always felt like a bit of a roller coaster. So, the Harrison Foundation Architectural Scholarship was my golden ticket. It wasn't just a partial scholarship, it was a full ride. It covered tuition, fees, and a generous stipend for living expenses. It was awarded to only 5 students nationwide each year. Winning it felt like a miracle. I remember the day the acceptance letter came. I was screaming and crying and jumping around my room. I called my dad first, and I could hear the pride swelling in his voice. "That's my girl, I knew you could do it," he boomed. That summer, before my freshman year, was filled with celebration. My dad and Susan threw a big backyard barbecue. All their friends were there, patting my dad on the back, congratulating him as if he'd won the lottery. He soaked it up, a beer in one hand, the other draped proudly over my shoulder. "Emma's the genius," he'd say with a wide, salesman's smile. "We're just lucky to be along for the ride." Susan was just as effusive, telling everyone how she always knew I had a special talent. It felt good. It felt like we were a team, a real family celebrating a shared victory. The scholarship funds were managed through a straightforward process. The Harrison Foundation would deposit the full amount for the semester directly into a dedicated university account. From there, tuition and fees were automatically paid, and the remaining stipend was transferred to my personal student bank account. Because I was a minor when I first applied, the initial paperwork required a parent's signature and information. My dad handled all of it. He sat with me at the kitchen table, pointing where to sign, explaining the jargon. "Just boring legal stuff, kiddo," he said, tapping a stack of papers. "Let me take care of the headaches. You just focus on being brilliant." I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my dad, my first and greatest champion. For the first 2 years, everything seemed perfect. The stipend was more than enough to cover my rent, food, and supplies. I even managed to save a little. I worked a part-time job at a coffee shop on campus, not because I had to, but because I wanted my own pocket money for things my stipend didn't cover. I was independent, thriving, and excelling in my classes. My dad would call every Sunday. We'd talk about my projects, my professors, and he'd always end the call the same way. "Just remember who your biggest fan is. We're so proud of you." He made it sound like my success was a reflection of his good parenting, and at the time, I was happy for him to think so. I was so consumed by my work, so focused on the future he always said I was destined for, that I failed to see the subtle, hairline cracks beginning to form in the foundation of my life. The praise was constant, but the details were becoming vague. When I tried to talk about the specifics of my finances or the renewal process for the scholarship, he'd wave it away. "Don't you worry about that, Emma. I've got all automated, it's handled." I took his confidence as competence. That was my first mistake. The beginning of my junior year was when the ground beneath me started to feel unsteady. It started small, with things that were easy to explain away. The first stipend deposit of the semester was late. Not by much, just a week. I called my dad, a little worried about my rent being due. "Oh, the university must be dragging its feet," he said breezily. "You know how bureaucracies are. It'll show up. Don't stress." And it did a few days later. The amount was a little less than I expected, but I chalked it up to a rise in university fees or a change in the health insurance plan. I was too busy with a major project deadline to dig into it. I just tightened my budget, picked up a few extra shifts at the coffee shop, and moved on. A couple of months later, I got an email from the university's housing department saying my payment was overdue. This was a first. My rent was paid directly from my student account, a system that had worked flawlessly for 2 years. I logged into my university portal, and my stomach clenched. My student account balance was much lower than it should have been. It looked like the stipend transfer hadn't been enough to cover both my living expenses and the automatic housing payment. I called my dad again, this time with a knot of real anxiety in my chest. "Mark, something's wrong with my account. It says I have an overdue housing bill." There was a slight pause on his end. "Susan and I were just talking about this," he said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "The Harrison Foundation sent out a letter a while back. They had to restructure some things. The stipends were slightly reduced for all the current recipients. It's not just you." He sounded so certain, so matter-of-fact. "It's a bummer, I know, but we can't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? A full tuition scholarship is still incredible." He told me not to worry, that he and Susan would send me some money to cover the shortfall. "We've got your back," he promised. A few hours later, a few $100s landed in my bank account. The relief was so immediate that it overshadowed my questions. Why hadn't I seen this letter? When I asked, he said it probably went to our home address, and he'd forgotten to mention it sooner with everything he had going on at work. It seemed plausible. Plausible enough for me to let it go. But the cracks kept appearing. I started getting notices from the university bookstore about unpaid lab fees. My meal plan, which was also supposed to be covered, suddenly wasn't. Each time I'd call my dad, and each time he had an answer. "It's the university's new processing system, they're having glitches." Or, "The foundation is cutting back on the extras, focusing only on tuition." And every time, he and Susan would send me just enough money to patch the hole. It was like playing a game of financial whack-a-mole. As soon as one problem was solved, another popped up. I was constantly on edge, checking my bank account obsessively, taking on as many extra shifts as I could until my grades started to suffer. The stress was immense. The freedom my scholarship was supposed to provide had vanished, replaced by a constant, low-grade panic about money. My best friend, Liam, was the first to call it out. Liam is a computer science student, pragmatic and logical to a fault. We were studying in the library one night when another insufficient funds email hit my inbox. I let out a frustrated groan and put my head in my hands. "Another one?" he asked, peering over his laptop. I explained the situation, repeating my dad's excuses about the foundation cutbacks and university glitches. Liam frowned, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Emma, this doesn't add up," he said slowly. "A prestigious foundation like that doesn't just restructure without massive, formal announcements to the students. And a university doesn't have this many glitches with one person's account. It smells fishy." I defended my dad, almost reflexively. "He's handling it. He's been helping me out." Liam looked at me, his expression softening with concern. "I know he's your dad. But is he helping you out? Or is he patching holes in a boat that he might have drilled himself?" The question hung in the air, ugly and unwelcome. I dismissed it, angry that he would even suggest such a thing. But the seed of doubt had been planted. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder if my dad's reassurances weren't a shield, but a smokescreen. The breaking point came during the spring semester of my junior year. The financial problems had become a constant, draining hum in the background of my life. I was working nearly 30 hours a week on top of a full course load, and I was exhausted. My designs were suffering, my grades were slipping, and the joy I once found in my work was being choked out by anxiety. The money my dad and Susan sent was sporadic, always just enough to quell the immediate crisis, but never enough to get ahead. My relationship with them had become strained. Our Sunday calls, which used to be about my achievements, were now tense negotiations about overdue bills. My dad's tone had shifted from proud to put upon, as if my financial needs were a burden he was tired of carrying. The final straw wasn't a bill, but a letter. It wasn't in a university envelope. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the official crest of the Harrison Foundation. It was addressed directly to me at my campus apartment. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slid it open. I had never received direct mail from the foundation before. My dad had always insisted he was the sole point of contact. The letter was from the foundation's director. It started with congratulations on my continued academic excellence and my recent submission to the prestigious undergraduate architectural review, something I hadn't even told my dad about yet. Then, I read the paragraph that made the world drop out from under me. As you begin to plan for your fourth and final year, it read, we want to remind you about the option to convert your final year's living stipend into a post-graduation seed fund for establishing your own practice. As you know, your full scholarship package includes $75,000 per academic year, with approximately $15,000 allocated as a stipend after tuition and fees. Should you wish to pursue the seed fund option, please have your designated parent or guardian, Mr. Mark Collins, sign and return the enclosed form. I read the sentence again and again. $75,000 per academic year. $15,000 stipend. The numbers swam before my eyes, refusing to make sense. My tuition was around $60,000. That meant my stipend should have been $15,000 a year or $7,500 a semester. That was nearly double what I had been receiving, even in the good years before the cutbacks started. The air left my lungs, the letter trembled in my hands. The lies, the excuses, the patches, the constant stress, it all coalesced into one horrifying truth. There were no cutbacks. There were no glitches. There was just theft. A slow, systematic siphoning of my future by the one person I believed would protect it at all costs. The blood drained from my face. I stumbled back and sat heavily on my bed, the letter crinkling in my fist. The man who cheered for my Lego cities, who told me I would build skyscrapers, had been quietly demolishing my foundation, brick by stolen brick. For a long time, I just sat there numb. The shock was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. Then the numbness gave way to a cold, clear rage. It was a type of anger I had never felt before, sharp and focused. Every conversation, every reassuring lie, every "we've got your back" played back in my mind, now tainted with the sickening filter of deceit. He hadn't been helping me. He had been managing his crime. The money he and Susan sent wasn't a gift. It was a calculated drip feed to keep me from asking too many questions, to keep the scheme running. He was using a small portion of my own money to placate me while he stole the rest. I immediately called Liam. I could barely get the words out, my voice shaking with fury. "You were right," I choked out, and I read him the letter. He was silent for a moment, and then he just said, "I'm on my way." When he arrived, he found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by every financial document I had. Bank statements, university bills, the letter from the foundation. Liam didn't offer platitudes or empty comforts. He became the logical, methodical friend I needed. "Okay," he said, kneeling beside me. "Shock is step one. Step two is proof. We need to build a case so airtight that he can't lie his way out of it." That night, the grief of betrayal hardened into resolve. My father had mistaken my trust for foolishness. He had underestimated me. He was about to find out how big of a mistake that was. The dream he helped build was gone, but I would use its ruins to construct my revenge. The rage didn't subside. It sharpened. It became my fuel. The next 48 hours were a blur of cold, calculated action. Liam was my rock, the calm, logical force to my emotional tempest. He turned my small apartment into a war room. His laptop was open, and he was already mapping out a plan of action. "Okay, first things first," he said, pulling a whiteboard over. "We can't just accuse him. We need a complete, undeniable paper trail. We need to know where every single dollar went." Our first step was to gain access to the account my dad controlled. The Harrison Foundation letter mentioned that the funds were deposited into a dedicated university account. However, my dad had set it up so that the stipend portion was then transferred out. Where to? That was the billion-dollar, or rather, the $10,000 question. When he'd helped me set everything up years ago, he'd created a joint savings account in both. Our names? His explanation at the time was that it was for emergency purposes, a way for him to easily send me money if I needed it. It was this account that the stipend transfers were supposed to go into before I moved the funds to my personal checking. I had online access, but I rarely checked it, trusting that the amounts were correct. I logged in, my breath caught in my throat. The transaction history was a roadmap of his deception. Each semester, for 3 years, a deposit of roughly $7,500 from the university would arrive like clockwork, and within a day or two, 2 transactions would follow. First, a transfer of a smaller amount, around $4,000, which then got smaller over time, to my student checking account. This was the stipend I saw. The second transaction was always a transfer of the remaining balance, thousands of dollars, to another account. An account I didn't recognize. "He's not even trying to hide it," I whispered, horrified. Liam leaned closer to the screen. "He's arrogant. He figured you'd never look. Can you see the details of that other account?" I clicked on the transaction. It only showed the last 4 digits of the account number. "It's not enough," Liam muttered. "But it's a start." He got to work. Using his computer science skills, he started looking for digital breadcrumbs. He explained that if my dad had ever accessed that mystery account from our home Wi-Fi, there might be traces of it. It was a long shot, but it was all we had. While Liam hunted in the digital world, I focused on the physical one. I needed official records. I made an appointment with the university's financial aid office. I was terrified they wouldn't speak to me, that all the information would be cordoned off by parental access. I walked into the office of Mr. Henderson, a kind-faced man who looked like he'd seen it all. I laid out a carefully edited version of my story. I told him I was trying to do some long-term financial planning and needed a full, detailed breakdown of all the Harrison scholarship funds that had been dispersed to my student file since my freshman year. Because I was now 21, I had the right to access my own records. He nodded understandingly and tapped at his keyboard. A few minutes later, he turned the monitor towards me. There it was, an official university ledger showing every transaction. $75,000 deposited by the foundation each year, $60,000 paid to the bursar for tuition, and a $15,000 surplus stipend transferred out each year. It listed the destination account for the transfer, that joint savings account. "Can you print this for me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. Mr. Henderson gave me a sympathetic look, as if he suspected there was more to the story. "Of course, Emma," he said softly. I walked out of that office with a thick stack of papers that constituted the first pillar of my case, official proof of the funds I should have received. That evening, Liam had a breakthrough. "I got it," he said, his eyes wide. He had managed to find a cached data log on my dad's old laptop, which he'd given me the year before. On it were faint digital fingerprints of his online banking. He had accessed an account at a different bank, one whose last 4 digits matched the transfers. The account was a joint checking account held in the names of Mark Collins and Susan Collins, my stepmother. The breath I was holding escaped in a painful hiss. She wasn't just a passive observer, she was a participant. Her name was on the account where my money was being funneled. All those times she had looked at me with pity, telling me, "Things are tough for everyone," she knew. She knew they were living off my stolen scholarship money. The final piece of the puzzle came from a simple credit card statement. I had him on paper, I had him digitally, but I wanted to know why. What was so important they had to steal from their own daughter? While Liam worked, I had done some digging of my own into my parents' lifestyle. They had recently bought a new luxury SUV. They took a trip to Italy last summer, something they'd posted all over social media. Susan's boutique was struggling, but she was still wearing designer clothes. Using the login information for the joint account my dad and I shared, I was able to see a list of linked external accounts. One of them was a credit card. His credit card. I clicked on it, and there it was, page after page of statements. The dates of the large transfers from my stipend account lined up perfectly with hefty payments made to this high-interest credit card. Payments for the trip to Italy. A down payment on the SUV. Charges from high-end restaurants and stores. They weren't just surviving, they were funding a lifestyle they couldn't afford on my back. They were using my dream to pay for their delusions. With the printed bank statements, the university ledger, and the credit card bills spread across my floor, I had it all. Undeniable, cold, hard proof. N. Ow, all that was left was to design the confrontation. With the evidence piled on my coffee table, the raw, chaotic anger inside me began to cool and solidify into something far more dangerous. A plan. Liam and I sat in my apartment, the silence punctuated only by the rustle of papers as we organized them into a damning narrative. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about forcing an admission. It was about making my father and stepmother look at what they had done without the filters of their lies and excuses. You can't just throw this at them, Liam warned, tapping a stack of bank statements. Mark is a salesman. He's professionally trained to talk his way out of anything. He'll twist it, deny it, gaslight you, and make you feel like you're the crazy one. He was right. A simple, emotional confrontation would be a disaster. I needed to control the environment, the narrative, and the outcome. This needed to be executed with the same precision I would use to design a building. Every element had to be deliberate. My plan had 3 phases. Phase 1, the setup. I needed to get them in a room on my terms. I called my dad, forcing my voice to sound tired and defeated. "Dad," I started, putting a little quiver in my tone. "I can't do this anymore. The stress with money, my grades, it's all too much. I'm thinking of dropping out." The silence on the other end was heavy. This was a direct threat to his image, to the proud father role he loved to play. "Don't be ridiculous, Emma," he said, his voice tight with alarm. "You're not dropping out. We'll figure it out." "I don't see how," I said, letting a fake sob catch in my throat. I think I need to come home for a weekend to talk. We need a real family meeting. Me, you, and Susan. We need to lay all the cards on the table about my finances and the scholarship. Maybe there's something we're all missing." He agreed immediately, his relief palpable. He thought he was walking into a meeting to manage his stressed-out daughter. He had no idea he was walking into a trial. I set the time, Sunday at noon. Their house. I wanted him to be comfortable, to feel secure in his own territory before I tore it all down. Phase 2, the execution. This was the most critical part. I couldn't do it alone. I needed a witness, someone who couldn't be emotionally manipulated or dismissed. I thought about bringing Liam, but my dad would immediately see him as my accomplice. I needed someone with authority. An idea sparked, one that was both terrifying and brilliant. The Harrison Foundation. Their name had been invoked in his lies for years. It was time for them to have a voice. I spent an entire day drafting an email to Mr. Henderson at the University Financial Aid Office and to the director of the Harrison Foundation who had sent me that fateful letter. I laid out the entire situation, attaching scans of the key pieces of evidence, the university ledger showing the full stipend and the bank statements showing the fraudulent transfers. I didn't ask them to intervene legally. I asked for something much simpler. I asked them to join a video call at 12:30 p.m. on Sunday. I explained that I was confronting my father and that having a representative from the foundation present to simply state the facts of the scholarship would prevent any further gaslighting. I told them I would be recording the entire meeting for my own protection. To my astonishment, they agreed. The director of the foundation, a woman named Mrs. Albright, responded personally. She was appalled and assured me that while they couldn't provide legal counsel, she would be personally available for the call to clarify the foundation's unwavering commitment to its scholars. She understood immediately what I was doing. using the institution's authority as a shield and a sword. Phase 3, the ultimatum. This wasn't about sending my dad to jail. As furious as I was, the thought of him behind bars of that level of public destruction made me feel sick. It would blow back on me on my future. No, I wanted justice, not just punishment. I wanted restitution. Liam helped me calculate the exact amount my father had stolen. Over 3 years, it was just over $28,000, but that wasn't the true cost. I added the wages I had lost from the extra hours I had to work, a figure we conservatively estimated at another $15,000. I added a penalty for the emotional distress and the impact on my grades, a number I set at $10,000. The grand total was $53,000. I typed up a formal repayment agreement. It stipulated that he had 48 hours to transfer the full amount to an account that I controlled. If he didn't, a package containing copies of every piece of evidence, along with the recording of our meeting, would be sent to the district attorney's office, to his employer, and to Susan's real estate brokerage. The blueprint was complete. It was cold, ruthless, and left no room for error. The night before I drove home, I laid all the documents out in a folder, a separate copy for each of them. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The girl who cried over overdue bills was gone. In her place was an architect, and I had just designed the demolition of my father's world. I drove the 2 hours home on Sunday morning, the folder with my evidence sitting like a bomb on the passenger seat. I felt strangely detached, as if I were observing someone else's life. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw my dad's new SUV, the one I had helped pay for, gleaming in the sun. The sight of it sent a jolt of ice-cold fury through me, steadying my nerves. Susan opened the door, her face arranged in a look of practiced sympathy. "Emma, honey, we're so glad you came. Don't you worry, we'll sort this all out." She wrapped me in a hug that felt like a cage. My dad was in the living room, standing by the fireplace with his hands in his pockets, trying to look like a concerned patriarch. "Emma, good to see you. Now, what's this about dropping out? That's not my daughter talking." I took a deep breath. "Let's sit down," I said, my voice flatter than they expected. We all sat on their expensive new couches. I placed my laptop on the coffee table between us but didn't open it yet. As I said on the phone, I wanted to lay all the cards on the table. I began, my eyes fixed on my father. "For the last 1.5 years, I have been under extreme financial distress. You've told me it's because the Harrison Foundation made cutbacks and the university has been having administrative issues." My dad nodded, leaning forward earnestly. "Exactly, and we've been helping you through it, Emma, every time you've needed it." "Let's talk about that help," I said, my voice hardening. "You told me the stipend was reduced. Can you tell me what the reduced amount was?" He hesitated for a second. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but it was a significant cut. A couple $1,000s a semester, at least. "And Susan," I said, turning to my stepmother, who was now looking uneasy, "you were aware of these cutbacks." She wrung her hands. "Of course, dear. Your father kept me in the loop. We've both been so worried about you." "Okay," I said. I opened my laptop and angled it so they could see the screen. "I have a video call scheduled in 5 minutes with someone who can clear up all this confusion for us. Her name is Mrs. Albright. She's the director of the Harrison Foundation." The color drained from my father's face. Susan just stared, her mouth slightly agape. "What? Why would you do that?" my dad stammered, his composure cracking for the first time. "That's not necessary." "I think it is," I said calmly as I clicked to start the call. A moment later, Mrs. Albright's professional, composed face appeared on the screen. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice crisp. "Am I speaking with Emma, Mark, and Susan Collins?" We all murmured a greeting. My parents looked like they'd seen a ghost. "Emma has requested my presence to clarify the terms of her scholarship," Mrs. Albright continued, getting straight to the point. "Mr. Collins, the foundation has a record of you being the parent administrator on this account. Can you confirm for me the total annual value of the Harrison scholarship?" My dad was cornered. He licked his lips, his eyes darting around the room. It's full tuition," he managed to say. "The scholarship is valued at $75,000 per year," Mrs. Albright stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "After Ms. Collins's tuition and fees of approximately $60,000 are paid, there is a remaining surplus stipend of $15,000 annually, or $7,500 per semester. This amount has never been reduced, restructured, or delayed by the foundation. We have disbursed this full amount every semester for the past 3 years to the designated university account." The silence in the room was absolute. Mrs. Albright had just detonated the bomb. I watched as the reality of the situation crashed down on my father and stepmother. Susan put a hand to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. My dad just stared at the screen, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. He had been so sure of his control, so confident in his lies. "Thank you, Mrs. Albright. That's all the clarification I needed," I said. I ended the call before she could say anything else. I didn't need her anymore. The authority had served its purpose. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 identical folders. I slid one across the coffee table to my father and one to Susan. "Open it." My dad's hands trembled as he opened the folder. Inside were the university ledgers, the statements from our joint account showing his transfers, the statements from the secret account in his and Susan's name, and the credit card bills detailing their lavish spending. I watched his eyes scan the documents. The salesman's charm melted away, replaced by the cornered, desperate look of a man who has been caught. He looked up at me, and for a fleeting moment I saw shame in his eyes. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a pathetic, defensive anger. "You went behind my back, you spied on me," he snarled, throwing the papers on the table. "After everything I've done for you, I was just managing the money. It's complicated. You wouldn't understand." "I understand that you stole $28,450 directly from my stipend," I said, my voice like ice. "I understand that you used my scholarship, my future, to pay for your vacations and your car. And I understand that you, Susan, knew all about it." Susan burst into tears. "Mark told me it was an investment account. He said he was managing it for you, to make it grow." "An investment account that paid for a trip to Italy," I shot back. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. My dad stood up, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "This is a family matter, Emma. A misunderstanding. We can fix this." "No," I said, standing to face him. "This is not a misunderstanding. This was a crime. On the top of that folder is a repayment agreement." I pointed to the document. "You have 48 hours to transfer $53,000 into a new account that I control. That's the money you stole plus damages. If you don't, a third copy of this folder, along with a recording of this entire conversation, goes to the DA, your boss, and Susan's brokerage. The choice is yours. You can face private consequences with me, or public and professional ruin. You have 2 days to decide." I turned and walked out of the house without looking back, leaving the ruins of their lies scattered on the coffee table behind me. The 48 hours after the confrontation were the longest of my life. I went back to my apartment and just sat there, waiting. I didn't know if he would call, beg, threaten, or simply ignore my ultimatum and call my bluff. Part of me, the small, wounded child that still lived somewhere inside, half expected him to show up at my door, full of remorse, ready to atone. But that part of me had been silenced by years of deception. The architect in me, the one who had designed this demolition, knew that structures built on lies don't get repaired. They get leveled. Liam stayed with me, a silent, supportive presence. He ordered food, made sure I was drinking water, and handled the few texts that came in from my panicked stepmother. They were a jumble of pleas and accusations. "You're tearing this family apart," one read. "Your father was only trying to protect you from the world." I didn't bother to respond. What was there to say? The call came with 3 hours to spare on the second day. It was my dad. His voice was hollow, stripped of all its usual bluster. There was no apology, there was no remorse. There was only the flat, defeated tone of a man who had run out of moves. "What's the account number?" he asked. I recited the numbers of the new account I had opened, my voice betraying no emotion. "The money will be there within the hour," he said, and then he hung up. There was no "I'm sorry." No, "How could you do this?" Just the cold, transactional exchange of a hostage negotiation. He wasn't paying for his crime, he was paying to make the problem go away. An hour later, I refreshed my online banking page. The number stared back at me from the screen, a pending deposit of $53,000. I looked at it for a long time, expecting to feel a surge of triumph or relief. Instead, I felt a profound emptiness. I had won. I had gotten justice. But I had lost my father. Or rather, I had lost the illusion of the father I thought I had. The price of my future was the confirmation that my dad's love had been conditional all along. The aftermath was quiet and absolute. I used a portion of the money to pay my final year's tuition and expenses up front, severing the final tie to the Harrison Foundation's administrative process. I hired a lawyer to send my father and stepmother a cease and desist letter, legally barring them from contacting me. I never wanted to hear his excuses or her tearful justifications again. Their chapter in my life was over. The news of what happened traveled in whispers through our extended family. From what I pieced together from a sympathetic aunt, my father's employer did find out. Not from me, but through the grapevine of office gossip that ignites when a sales manager suddenly has to liquidate all his assets to pay a mysterious debt. He wasn't fired, but he was demoted. The new SUV was sold. They had to downsize their house. The lifestyle that my scholarship had funded evaporated, leaving them with the quiet shame of their choices. For me, the last year of university was about rebuilding. I poured myself into my work with a renewed, almost ferocious focus. My designs became bolder, more honest. The pain and rage I had processed became a source of strength. I graduated with honors at the top of my class. I didn't invite my father or Susan to the ceremony. My only guests were Liam and my aunt, the two people who had shown me what true, unconditional support looked like. Today, I am a junior architect at a firm in a city hundreds of miles away from my hometown. I am paying my own bills, living in my own apartment, and building a life that is entirely my own. There are still scars. Sometimes, I'll see a father and daughter sharing a laugh, and I'll feel a familiar pang of loss for something that was never really real. But then I look at the skyline outside my window, at the towers of glass and steel reaching for the sky, and I remember what I am capable of. My father may have tried to demolish my foundation, but he taught me an invaluable lesson. If the foundation is corrupt, you have to tear it down. And from the rubble, you can build something stronger, something true, something that belongs only to you, brick by painful brick.